Good day, Ian.
G'day, Marty.
Sorry, I had to use an Australian greeting. That's just in me now. So,
Well, no, you didn't have to, but
well, I didn't
I'm
have to. You're
glad you
right.
did.
All right.
Howdy,
Well,
Marty, as Tony would say.
yeah, there you go. Well, thanks for taking some time with us here. Ian Carmichael, for those of you who don't know, watching here in the US or wherever, Ian Carmichael is the CEO of Matthias Media. They're in Sydney. So, thanks for joining us and taking the time. Ian, I've had a number of people call our office or email me and say, "Hey, you guys are the trellis and vine people, and I just what ideas do you have about how vine work is working or is looking now?" And so I thought I would talk to some people from around the world and just maybe if we could gather some ideas and tips and thoughts and provoke our thinking, that might be helpful. So maybe spend the next few minutes. One of the reasons I wanted to have you on, among many, is that most of the guys I've talked to are in charge kind of the top down ministry, whether senior pastors or ministry leaders. Um, I thought you are kind of like middle management. So you're a leader at the church, but you're not a pastor. You're not on staff, but you're part of the ministry team, and you're doing ministry. So I just want to hear from your side. What are you guys doing at your church for your Sunday morning gatherings, and maybe kind of more broadly vine work?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're right. I'm not even an elder in our church, but I'm involved in leading a small group, and now I'm now leading what we're calling Zoom Church. And so Zoom Church, what our church has done is it's broken we've got normally three congregations, and it's broken each congregation down into units of about 30 people, maybe a little bit more when you include the kids. And those 30 people are meeting together through Zoom each Sunday morning, and we're calling that Zoom Church.
Hmm.
Um, and so I'm one of the leaders of that Zoom Church with another fellow, and it's our responsibility to run that church. And we're provided with a video from the church, which includes the announcements, a kids spot, and sermon, plus two songs to sing. So we're provided that, and the rest is kind of up to us to lead. So leading the prayer time, any discussion we have, the introductions, so on, organising the Bible reading, that's all put onto the Zoom church leaders. And it's, I mean, one of the advantages of that is it's made church a much more interactive experience
Mm.
for those joining. It's not a live stream where you just sit and watch. This is actually where we have Zoom and we interact and we say responsive prayers. And last Sunday we said the Apostles' Creed together, for example. We sing together, but with the technology of Zoom, you can't really do that with microphones open. So we turn the microphones off, but we can see each other singing, and we are literally singing. Particularly encourage the adults with kids to sing with their kids. I think it's a really good thing to do, particularly dads. And so it's a much more interactive experience than just watching a live stream. And that's one of its great benefits, that model.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's wow. How many people did you say are in each little mini gathering?
Yeah, it varies. So some of our evening congregation is a bit smaller, and so the Zoom churches are a little bit smaller, I think. But in our group, there's around 35, but that includes about 12 kids.
Okay. So one of the things I know compared to what I know many churches here in the States are doing, kind of putting their either a recording or live stream up on YouTube, Vimeo, or Facebook Live and kind of watch and then you turn it off and go. I know a number of churches are excited because they see they have a lot more devices representing people than they would on a Sunday morning. And so that's exciting. So I'm curious in your setup, if I've texted my neighbor and said, "Hey, join us for church," would they be invited to? They would come into your mini group, and do you find any of that happening?
Yeah, this is something I and others have raised with our church leadership, that there is a downside to this model in that it you the the outsider can't just come along anonymously and watch. They actually have to come into a group, quite a small group, and make themselves known and potentially have their camera on and interact with people at points. And that's a higher entry bar than just watching online from home without interacting. Our church has also asked people not to invite non-Christian friends without talking to our pastor first about it. So our pastor wants to know who's in church with us. And again, that's just another little barrier to using it evangelistically. Now, there's obviously good pastoral reasons for doing that, but there's just an extra step that the Christian has to take before inviting the non-Christian to join our Zoom church. So we've kind of talked about that with the staff team, and I've suggested that maybe we could have a video offering online on YouTube, say, that is for outsiders to come and get some taste of what church is like, but that we kind of say up front in that video and at the end, this is not real church. This is kind of just a taste of it, and it's a small taste. Church is about community and getting to know each other and doing things together, sharing in church together. So if you want the full church experience, please just contact us and we'll slot you into a Zoom church. I think they're still thinking that through and working out how to do that well. So I'm hopeful we'll get there. But having said that, our pastor said to me that actually the numbers are up quite considerably in terms of people coming into the Zoom churches. So I think we've got church of something like 400 people normally, and we're actually getting about 500 people, and that's not just devices. This is actual people because we see them on the screen, and we know their names. So we actually got quite a few visitors, even though the barrier is a bit higher than normal. So that's interesting, but so it'll be interesting to see whether they change the model at all.
Now, do you have any responsibility during the week for the people in your group?
Yeah, so our Zoom church is based around our home group. So pretty much all the people in our home group, Wednesday night home group, are in our Zoom church, the same leaders, but plus some other people who aren't in a home group. Some older people and some more fringe people. And so, yes, we've been asked to take responsibility for connecting with those people and making sure they're able to come and there's no technology problems. And if they don't come, to chase them up and see if everything's okay. Keep inviting them if they haven't come along. And yeah, just to care for them generally as pastors. But obviously, if there's more significant issues, then we can pass them on to the pastoral team and get them to make those conversations if necessary.
One of the things I'm hearing from small group leaders and pastors who oversee small groups is that their small group leaders are realizing the need for the first time, even though it's been there, to be in touch with their people regularly. So it's much less programmatic, that all their efforts go into leading the Wednesday night small group. And now they realize the need to have something going on, whether it's a Zoom Bible study or the like, but also to check in with all their people throughout the week at some point or every other week. And then I hear the leader saying, we can't do that. It's too much. That's so many. And so now he said, well, I need someone to help me, and trying to figure out how we go about getting other shepherds alongside to do that kind of one another personal work. How are you guys doing that in your group? Are you splitting up a list to call? Are you, just anything going on there?
Yeah, I think we're still in the early days of figuring that out, Marty. We've kind of been doing it in our home group and dividing the home group up to make sure that we, when we break up into prayer triplets on a Wednesday night, for example, that we have some consistency, that we develop a closer relationship with one or two group members where we can just be in touch with them and see how things are going with them. But I guess one of the things about having responsibility for the Sunday group as well is that I'm now not just worried about whether they come to church, to our home group regularly. I'm now thinking about, are they coming to Sunday regularly? So my pastoral horizons, if you like, have been broadened by Zoom church. It is, having said that, it is quite a big responsibility to put on lay leaders. I did, particularly with the first few weeks of learning the technology of Zoom and how to run Zoom church. The first few weeks was very demanding. We spent a lot of time preparing. So it's been quite a big burden, but that's easing back now. But one of the things I think we have to be careful of is in that decentralization of ministry is just, I think, quite easy for pastors to forget that Saturday is often the sort of day off for lay people. So we don't get our order of service and run sheet for our Zoom church till Thursday afternoon. So if you can't do anything on Friday in terms of linking up, or Thursday night, probably going to end up on Saturday doing quite a bit of preparation on Saturday, organising the prayers and all those sort of things. That's traditionally been my day off, and now I've got quite a lot of work to do for Zoom church. So I think that's something pastors probably just have to be a little bit mindful of, is not just putting on pastoral burden on lay leaders, but making sure they're actually getting sufficient downtime.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think I was talking to Craig Glassick at Vine Growers and Rory Shiner out in Perth, and both of them said similar things about their teams trying that their burnout. They're hearing about pastoral burnout, but I'm also similarly hearing about ministry leader burnout. Thinking about elder teams meeting weekly. Most people I know are still working in some capacity, and we all kind of read the articles now that say how more tired we are from work that's often Zoom based. And so I think that's really wise words to say, is not just for pastors to watch for themselves, but also with their ministry leaders, is we want to push and we want to use this time as an opportunity for them to understand the value of personal work and not just programmatic work, but at the same time, just be careful just to know. I think you had told me in a just personal phone call we had, just kind of the idea of how that we might be going at 60, 70%, and that's what we should expect of people. Now, I think we've probably all gotten accustomed a little bit, but it's probably still there. Everyone I talk to, they're tired. And so just, I think it's, anyway, yeah, I appreciate that wise word.
Well, I think Zoom fatigue is a very real thing. And on our Zoom church, we open our Zoom meeting room 10 minutes before the Zoom church starts, and then we finish with breakout rooms where we're in discussion, which can go for 20 minutes, half an hour. First few weeks of Zoom church, I was sitting on a chair in front of Zoom for 2.5 hours straight. And at the end of that, I was wrecked. It's a long time to be on a Zoom call. And particularly if you're leading and trying to keep the technology working. And I could just feel my shoulders getting tense through the whole thing, as I was kind of concentrating so hard.
I'm thinking of technology. Just curious. I don't think I've asked anybody else this question. How are you guys encouraging or doing giving? I mean, I know a lot of churches have online giving, but a lot of churches here don't. Probably more so here, the kind of Sunday morning giving part is more prominent than maybe there, from what I understand. But I'm just curious what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I don't think we've done a lot yet, actually, which has been interesting, especially since our Zoom churches aren't really as open as other people's online churches are. So, with an online church, you probably do need to be a little bit careful about how you talk about when you ask for money. But our Zoom churches are a little bit more closed. And yet we haven't really had any word from our pastoral team about the issue of giving. I think most of our congregation are on bank transfer giving. So I think there's only a small proportion who use the boxes at church to put cash in. So I don't think it's a huge issue for us at the moment, but it's interesting. I think churches, from what I'm hearing in Sydney, there are going to be a lot of churches who are going to struggle with their budget for the year. I'm very concerned about it. Talking about their giving being down by 30-40%. I guess it depends a little bit on the nature of the demographics of your church and the sorts of jobs people are in. Our church, I think, is largely professional people, and I think they're probably less affected by the pandemic and the lockdown. churches where there's a higher proportion of, you know, plumbers and electricians and delivery drivers and so on, and hospitality workers, you know, their
Mm.
budgets are going to be really in need of some some thinking. And I think probably generosity generally has kind of, we haven't really started to think through the implications of this pandemic for our generosity, both generally as individuals and corporately as churches. Um, People are going to have to start thinking about that soon, I think.
Yeah, that's touchy, right? I was just talking to our senior pastor about the the week, the final week we all met together. I think it was the week that my two children got baptized. So I think I always remember the final week. Was his final sermon series in a generosity series. And I had asked them just last week, I said, if you had planned the generosity series, but hadn't started it yet, when would you put it in? Because it's such a sensitive time now. In one sense, you kind of, the scriptural model of Paul to the Corinthians is saying, yes, you are poor, but you're rich in Christ. So keep giving, keep giving. Um, it, you could make a case for that, but we also know there's sensitivity to the fact that many people in the industries you mentioned are really struggling financially. So yeah, what do we make of that? How do we untangle any of that?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, too? It's our churches are going to be slightly divided in this because, on the one hand, yes, there are people who've lost jobs and businesses. On the other hand, those who's continued in their jobs, often on full pay, they don't have expenses like they used to. They're not going on expensive overseas trips. They're not going out to restaurants as much, if at all. They're not going to concerts. Interest rates are at all-time lows, so their mortgage is under control. Um, so they've probably got more money to be generous with than they normally do, more discretionary income anyway. And yet, as I say, there are people who have got no income or only what they're getting from the government safety net kind of support. So on the one hand, yes, it's for some people there's a real need to challenge them about their generosity and their opportunity to be generous, particularly to those who are going to be struggling. And for those who are struggling, there's an opportunity to say, well, you need to learn to accept generosity.
Hmm.
The other thing I think I'd probably notice is that in our society, our community generally, generosity is very much on the agenda, and we're seeing acts of generosity all over the place, and people are lauding that. It's not just Christians who are being generous at this time. There's lots of generosity, and I wonder whether when generosity is in our culture and very apparent, and when the needs are very apparent, actually this might be a really good time to shape that generosity in biblical ways within our church community. And actually, this might be a good time to change the culture of generosity in our churches. So um, that's one of the things I've been thinking about. And to be transparent, the reason I've been thinking about it is because we've got the new resource which deals with this topic of generosity called the Generosity Project, and we're just launching that at the moment. And so for me, it was a very real question: is this the right time to launch it? Are pastors actually going to be at all interested in talking about generosity in the current climate? And initially, my inclination was to say no. Let's postpone the launch. Actually, my board challenged me on that and said, actually, the Macedonian Christians, as you alluded to, Macedonian Christians gave out of their extreme poverty. So generosity is not something limited to really good times. It's important in bad times as well.
And I appreciate how you talk about, I mean, those are the stories we hear every time we have a pastor and elder meeting in our church. We hear almost all of the time, we call people, how are you doing? Do you need anything? And they're like, no, I'm fine, but I want to help. I want to help. And you mentioned about how we hear generosity everywhere. But even though in one sense it's happened naturally, we know that true kind of sacrificial generosity isn't natural often. Sometimes it is. We praise God for that. But sometimes you said that we need to shake it. We need to shake the money loose. I mean, I think Jim Packer in his little helpful little book, I think Weakness is the Way, it's on 2 Corinthians. And in that section referring to, I'm paraphrasing a bit, kind of like how much do we know to give, and he says, uh, give up to the point you're a little bit uncomfortable, and then give some more. And just like really that to shake it up. But it's interesting. What do you think the connection then is between generosity and vine work? Kind of back to the question we started with. Seems like sometimes it's just treated as separate things. We have disciple making, training, and giving. But do you think there's a connection between those?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I think there's two ways I can see a really important connection. One is um, generosity is part of growing in Christian maturity. So it's part of that moving to the right. If we're neglecting to talk to people about uh, their resources, their time, their energy, their money, and how they use those as Christians, then we're kind of leaving an aspect of their lives behind towards the left. We want to bring everything to the right,
Hmm.
generosity. And I think those churches that are trying to create that Vine Project type culture of disciple making, um, they're going to need resources. To be effective in the Great Commission and the mission that our churches have to make disciples of the Lord Jesus, um, we want as many resources as we can get. So um, to engage in the Vine Project without engaging people's hearts and minds on the topic of generosity towards disciple making ministry, I think you're going to take out some of the effectiveness of what you're trying to do, because you'll run out of money to do all the things you would like to be able to do if people aren't going to be generous towards it. And more than that, if you give them the vision of what church should be like and growing disciples, that's an exciting vision of a worthwhile vision to be generous towards. And you want to motivate people that we actually know what we're doing. We just need some more resources to do it even better than we're currently doing it. So I think the two project books intersect at both those points. So the Vine Project and the Generosity Project now. Yeah, I would like to see people who are engaged in the Vine Project journey really giving some thought to whether the Generosity Project should be on their agenda as a church.
Huh. That's really fascinating. I appreciate you making that connection. Something I wouldn't have thought about. Kind of, I know we should give, but making that connection, it's all under the, as we would say in Trellis and Vine Project, disciple making is the umbrella which everything fits. And so, yeah, we need to move towards maturity in Christ. And Matthew 9:37-38 thing, we need more laborers for the harvest, and we need more harvest workers. And so that takes resources. And I think probably another thing that occurred to me as you were talking about that is it's kind of the snowball effect too. It could be that as we sacrifice our time, every sacrifice some things, it's momentum to sacrifice other things. So if I sacrifice my time for the sake of reading the Bible with someone, that I'm more naturally in the context of being able to willing to sacrifice some money to help him out if he needed it, or to help fund a couple young guys at our church to go off to theological college so that they could do more and more of that kind of work. So yeah, there's a lot there to it, and it is part of the culture change, dare I say that, that the Vine Project is encouraging. So interesting. Well, boy, you've given us a lot to think about, Ian. I thank you. Yes, I thank you for your time, and yeah, I appreciate it. And I think we'll put in the comments below the link to the Generosity Project. We'd love to hear feedback on it, especially here in the U.S. Where I'm at. Churches that do this, we have lots of churches doing the Vine Project. We'd love to have some churches do, as you say, the Generosity Project with it. Also, love to hear feedback from anybody thinking of doing kind of the small church model, or anything like what Ian was talking about, and hear how that's going as well. So anyway, Ian, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Marty. Been fun.